Right now, I want to look at the problems. It's a multifaceted discussion, really. The problems faced on our universities by academics whenever the trans issue comes into play. Now, this could be people who feel that they can't talk or say what they feel for fear of being sacked. We could be talking about academics who maintain a wall of silence, again, fearing that if they were to say what they really felt, that they might be sacked. And then, of course, let's not forget, you've also got trans academics out there who might very well find themselves in the crossfire between two intransient, pun intended, intransient groups, both of whom claim the upper moral ground. It's quite interesting. The story actually emerges in The Guardian, in which they detail an academic called Joe Phoenix who wanted to talk at Essex University just before Christmas about trans rights in prison. And her speech was eventually cancelled after people were tweeting, "We've got a transphobe on campus." You'll remember just before Christmas, we talked about the artist Rachel Ara. She was platformed by Oxford Brookes University. Again, the word transphobe was used against her, and I don't know if that was fair. And possibly the most telling thing of all is in preparation for this discussion, I looked through various notes on and The Guardian ran the same story essentially a year ago about universities struggling to deal with the trans issue exactly a year ago. So let's see if we can do a little better. We're going to be joined first of all by Paula Wright, researcher and comic, and then a little later by India Willoughby, trans broadcaster. So we'll start with you if we may, Paula. Happy New Year, by the way, and nice to talk to you.
Happy New Year.
The Guardian describes it as a minefield for universities negotiating trans issues. Is it?
I think it is. I think what's happening is there's a consultation at the minute over the Gender Recognition Act.
That's right.
Which, if it's changed, will effectively give trans activists kind of the strong arm of the law to go into female kind of protected spaces and what have you. But the thing about being on academia, on campus, is it's actually disproportionately full of, these so-called progressives whose primary goal, whether they be feminist, Marxist, non-binary, non-binary, colonial, anti-colonial scholars, their primary goal is to dismantle what they call this heteropatriarchy,
right.
Which is basically Western civilization. So any way they can do that, it's a kind of multi-pronged kind of attack on Western civilization and kind of stability and all that kind of thing. And they're disproportionately in academia and the media as well, which is why they get loads of traction in the media.
So but when you're saying disproportionately, are we talking about few people with a loud voice or lots of people? Because it's been a long time since I've been on a university, but it does seem that every university is filled with people with very strong, very strident, very intransient views about trans.
Well, I think it's distinguished between the professors who are there and the lecturers who are there doing it, and they get an influx of these soft minds every year that they can just fill with kind of postmodernist nonsense, and they become the kind of shock troops of these people who are these lecturers and these the people who are basically have got tenure in academia. And every generation that comes in, they're kind of as I say, they're kind of the brains are massaged into a kind of ideological kind of way, and then they're kind of set out on.
I mean, you're sounding, Paula, if I may say so, very close to what Professor Jordan Peterson, the firebrand academic from Canada, who's made quite a name for himself, particularly a darling of the alt-right. But I don't know if that's fair. But he says. I mean, he says that academia was hijacked, essentially, in the mid part of the last century by, as he put it, I think it was Marxist was the word he used, by Marxists with an agenda.
That was the Frankfurt School. That's on Wikipedia. Right. That's history.
And you would concur that there's a sort of Marxist invasion of our universities and the establishment of sort of peer review quasi-sciences in which Jordan Peterson was arguing, you said, I don't know, say a group like Women's Studies, and then you get other professors of Women's Studies all peer reviewing each other's work, all saying that their work is valid and sound. A self-reflective bubble, I suppose, is what he was describing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think it began as kind of Marxism. I don't know what it is. It's more kind of a postmodern thing now. The kind of the fluke or the parasite that's taken over academia at the minute is called intersectionality, and that comes from a guy called Derek Bell, who was in Harvard University, and critical race theory and intersectional feminism, all kinds of feminisms, and the kind of the current furore we've got over kind of racism in the media and all this thing about. I saw a woman on the TV this morning. She was an intersectional feminist who's it's kind of a mashup of postmodern feminism, gender feminism, and what's called critical race theory, which basically says individual racists, sexists, whatever bigots don't have to actually exist because we all live embedded in this kind of institutional oppressive system. So they don't have to come out with individual examples of when racism or sexism or any of this kind of thing might have happened, because this theory tells them it doesn't matter. It's just everywhere. It's like it's in the ether.
I'm following your drift because I'm doing it through the sort of prism of discussions about Meghan Markle, which are very much resonated there, and also because I follow you on Twitter, and so I can keep up with some of the terms you're using. I don't know whether I should say goodbye or not, but I want to bring in India Willoughby if I can, Paula, just to hear, because I see India, a trans woman, being told more often than not what to think and how to think about trans issues. Most recently by a man who said he had no intention of transitioning, but he wanted us to call him trans. So, India, good afternoon to you. What do you make?
Good afternoon, Matthew, and everybody else.
What do you make of this story, then, that universities are having to negotiate a minefield when it comes to anything to do with trans? And I would presume this includes trans academics.
Yeah, it's interesting when I've been looking at this story with Jo Phoenix. She refers to trans scholars, but that doesn't really make clear whether the actual scholar is trans or it's a scholar who studies trans. So a little bit of complexity there. But generally, Matthew, I'm just like an ordinary person. I'm totally fed up of all these isms and ideologies that go with this. I'm going to explain it now in really simple terms so everybody can understand. So you have feminism, which has had a good run. It's had a good run since the 60s at least. But it's now under threat by the rise of real transgender people. When you look at science, I know there'll be people listening to this shaking their head saying that can't possibly be true, but all these people complaining are actually philosophers, and they're all radical feminists. All of them are radical feminists. But
when we say radical feminist, as far as I understand it, I mean, when I was at university, there wasn't a thing called a radical feminist. There were feminists, and then there weren't feminists, and it was much simpler then. Feminists stood for equality of opportunity for one half of the population.
Well, radical feminism came into being more or less at the same time that trans people started to become public. And I'm just going to explain this in really simple terms. So basically, radical feminists believe that all gender in the world is completely made up.
Right.
So by that means that men gravitate to certain things because they've been conditioned to do so, and it's the same with women. However, trans people, and I'm not talking about the crazy people, as you know, I'm as much against them as anyone else, these people who adopt it as a fashion accessory. Real transgender people who are born that way obviously have a component in them that makes them want to change. Now, if that is established as scientific fact, that all of us, me, you, your guests today, we all have a gender identity in us, then the central plank of feminist belief falls away. It's like a Dan Brown novel.
Okay, I get that, but let's bring it back to the context of universities. I don't understand, and I've been discussing no platforming on universities now for going on 15 years, I should think, something like that. And I've never had anyone explain why a modern generation of students seems incapable of tolerating a view that doesn't fit with their own. absolutely bamboozled as to why there's no space on universities for people to voice views that not everybody, perhaps not the whole university, might. I don't care if everybody in the university disagrees with what the speaker has to say. The speaker should be allowed to say it if they've been invited.
I'm with you there. I think sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Hear, hear.
The way to dismantle this type of argument is to let these people talk. However, I do think there is a distinction whether you're going to allow academics to write academic papers, which then give credence and gravitas to their belief. I mean, this is a criminologist. I think we'd all be a little bit perturbed if we had a criminologist wanting to study the criminal.
I've got an answer to that.
Well, go on. I was going to say the answer I'd have to that is I don't know what to say what the criminologist, because the criminologist wasn't allowed to speak. So we're having a discussion about something that we've not been allowed to hear. But if you'll forgive me, India, let's give the last word to Paula. Paula Wright.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking, you were saying, why is this happening now? I've got a hunch, and it might be because there are a lot more just not very clever people in universities now. Everybody goes to university. You don't need any special kind of intelligence to go. It's just a rite of passage, isn't it? That everybody goes there. They go and get drunk. They dye their hair blue or pink or purple or what.
Very true.
And they become social justice warriors for a couple of years.
Maybe. It's a cynical note to end on, Paula, but maybe that's just what we need this afternoon, this Tuesday afternoon. Looking out the windows, actually, cynicism is just what we... It's pretty grim out there. Paula Wright, India Willoughby, pleasure talking to the both of you.